We all have a vested interest in having good teachers. I don't care what color they are. And with that, let me introduce Dennis Van Roekel, who is the president of the NEA. You would agree with that, wouldn't you, Dennis?
Absolutely.
I
was a high school math teacher for 23 years, and I got to be a math teacher because education played the role, and teachers are really critical in that, along with all of the adults that work in those public schools all across America.
And the key is public schools.
Amen.
The key is public schools. I honestly think public schools changed this country. So what happened in we know what happened. Let me ask this question. We've been talking about analyzing now. It's like I'm an old football player. So you win some, you lose some. The season's not over. So
no, it isn't.
Okay, the season is not over, guys. All right. And so we still have a chance to win this thing. Now, the question is, what did we learn from yesterday? That's the question I'll pose to you.
Well, as part of that analysis, I don't think we can forget about what happened in Ohio, where Senate Bill 5 eliminated all collective bargaining rights for public employees, and by a 2-to-1 vote, people overturned that. I think one of the things we learned from this election, recall elections are hard. They don't happen very often. And the very fact that there was a recall election, that it was as close as it was, that there were over 1 million people who voted against Walker and to recall him, that there were 50,000 volunteers who participated, that they knocked on 1.4 million doors, that they made 1.5 million phone calls. I think the lesson we learned is we put an infrastructure in place, and we're ready to go, and we need to enhance and make it better, but we need to be absolutely ready for the 2012 election.
All right. Now, the argument that I made earlier today was that we agree or disagree. I'd love to hear your opinion. We can't wait till the last minute. This is not something you start Labor Day. This is not something you start October. Agree or disagree?
I totally agree. We're doing it right now, and we'll take the lessons we learned from both Ohio and Wisconsin, and we are mobilizing all across this country. One of the things we're doing is trying to get educators for Obama, and we recommended and endorsed President Obama last summer at our national meeting. And we are signing up thousands every month to be educators for Obama. We want to make sure that we're doing that now and not waiting until the last minute.
All right. I'm thinking, too, I was with with Bill Lucy this last week, and we had a town hall meeting I moderated. And one of the members of the Congressional Black Caucus, one of the freshmen out of New Orleans, Congressman Richmond, they started talking about the postal workers because there were some postal workers there. And he made a very interesting point, and it seems like you're saying the same thing. Look, if you have a job that takes you from door to door, and everybody loves postal workers, teachers are beloved also, that, you've got to use these workers to get your point across. Now, I suspect teachers, this is what you're saying, teachers, you have parents, and there's nothing that prevents the NEA from instructing their members to educate parents of their students, is there?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
As educators, one of the things that we think is important is to demonstrate to our students and to the community that we're active in civic responsibilities. Elections and that whole civic process, that is what it means to be a good citizen. You ought to participate. Nothing has ever been achieved in this country without collective action.
And so there's nothing in the law or bylaws that prevents teachers from doing this?
No, obviously you can't do it in the classroom.
I understand, okay.
But when you're outside of school, not only are we allowed to do it, we encourage our members to do it. We think it's a great role model for our students to say, we care about what happens to all people. And in order to do that, you've got to participate in the democratic process.
I'm thinking as you're talking, I just had this image. Can you imagine my son or my child's teacher uh, being outside the classroom and, let's say, walking door to door. I just happen to be, showing up on the door of your student. I mean, how often does that happen?
Well,
To be and asking the family to be civically engaged.
I think it's a great thing for people to see. One of the other things we do across this country on Election Day is we have kids vote. When many schools are the voting site, and so they encourage parents to bring their son or daughter with them.
Yes.
And then as the parents go and vote in the, quote, real booths, they have the students go off and vote in their voting booths.
Really?
It's building early that civic responsibility that everyone must participate, or you can't have a democracy. And I think that's another thing we as educators can do, is to instill that in young students. Sometimes we get caught up in that all of this education is being evaluated with a high-stakes test in math and reading.
Right.
Well, we want more than that for a child. We want equity so that all children have an opportunity for that dream. We want to educate the whole child, and we want to make sure they understand their responsibility as citizens to be active and participate.
Dennis Van Roekel is the president of the NEA, and glad that he is with us. Now, final question for you. Based on what happened in Wisconsin, let me ask you to speak to what does this mean in the state of Wisconsin for teachers? Scott Walker now is riding high. He's got winds in his sails. So potentially, what could happen?
Well, one of the things that is not talked about as much but was absolutely critical in that election, there was a gentleman named John Lehman who was elected to the Senate. So now the Senate, Walker doesn't have free rein to attack workers in Wisconsin. He's a retired history teacher, and that's going to bring balance to the debate in the legislature, because now the Democrats have a majority in the Senate. So that's a real plus. But for all of the educators and both union and non-union workers in Wisconsin, I think it says we need to make sure that we're ready for November, that we're not going away, our voice will not be silenced, and together we can make a difference.
Now, remind people, if you don't mind, what got teachers upset with Walker to begin with?
What he did is very quickly he tried to eliminate all bargaining rights for public employee unions. And what's so important about that, I was a high school math teacher for 23 years.
Right.
And that first year of teaching, I thought if I cared enough and I worked hard enough, I could deliver for all of my students. But you soon realize you can't, because all of the decisions are made outside of your classroom by politically elected or politically appointed individuals. So if I want my voice heard about what's right and works for my students, I've got to have an organization. Governor Walker is trying to destroy that voice and that organization. And I think that both union and non-union people in Wisconsin say that's not the way it ought to be. There ought to be a voice, whether it's for educators or firefighters or nurses. They've got to have a voice in that public arena when they start making rules and regulations that impact their work, especially the students we teach.
And for people who think that teacher unions protect inadequate teachers, because this is the other argument, inadequate teachers through tenure, that type of thing. Your response as president of the NEA to that?
I'm so glad you asked me that question, Joe. In this country, we lose 47% of all teachers within 5 years. 47%. And to listen to these critics, they think the problem is it's too hard to fire the ones that are left. What I say is your system of recruitment, training, and hiring is totally broken. How dare you put anyone into a classroom with 25 or 30 or 35 kids who's not well-trained, certified, and licensed? So what we need to do is quality at the front door. When you talk to people in Finland or Singapore or Ontario, Canada, who are held up as leading the world, number one, they focus on equity, making sure that every student has a qualified teacher, good resources, good environment to learn. And secondly, they make sure that no one is allowed in a classroom until they're well trained. That's the direction we ought to go. And every child in America deserves this. And what's so sad about the system we use right now is the kids who are most disproportionately impacted by a revolving door of teachers or lack of adequate supplies and programs are the poor and children of color, and that's wrong. We need to change that in this country.
All right. Dennis, I look forward to talking to you periodically.
I would love to do that. Thank you very much, sir.
And I do appreciate, and I have said this before, sometimes it's like, I said it before you came on, that sometimes I can get God on before I can get some labor leaders on. But
I'll come on anytime you ask me.
I know you will. And I appreciate that, and thank your staff for getting in touch with us, and we'll talk again. Very clear discussion. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.